At Gate C-24, beneath the roof of Denver International Airport, Elaine Porter made a decision that would follow her long after Flight 742 left the ground. She stood behind the boarding desk with one hand beside the scanner, her posture rigid with the confidence of someone who had spent years believing authority and judgment were the same thing. Across from her, a black man in a charcoal sweater waited without raising his voice, stepping closer, or giving her any reason to fear him. Still, Elaine looked at him as if he had arrived carrying a problem. "Sir," she said, loud enough for passengers to hear, "you will not be boarding this flight." The man's expression barely changed, but something quiet passed behind his eyes, not surprise exactly, and not anger. It was recognition. He had seen this kind of moment before. What Elaine did not know was that within days, the same man would place his signature on an agreement that would end her position and force the airline to examine every comfortable lie it had told itself about fairness. 40 minutes earlier, Malcolm Reed had entered the terminal alone, carrying an overnight bag and a laptop case. At 47, he had learned how easily people mistook restraint for weakness and simplicity for lack of importance. His clothes were expensive but understated, chosen for comfort rather than display. Nothing about him announced that he was the founder and chief executive of Reed Crest Holdings, an investment company overseeing $16 billion in assets. Nothing revealed that his firm owned a 12% stake in North Star Aviation Group, the parent company of Horizon Union Airlines. That was intentional. Malcolm had spent 8 months reading polished reports about customer trust while complaints told a different story. The official numbers were clean. The language was reassuring. Yet beneath those reports he sensed friction, travelers describing unexplained scrutiny, employees speaking anonymously about pressure, and complaints being closed before anyone asked what had happened. He had decided to see the operation without a scheduled tour, without executives clearing his path, and without employees being warned that an investor was watching. Flight 742 to Seattle was supposed to be a test. It was also supposed to carry him to a 4 o'clock meeting where Reed Crest hoped to complete a logistics acquisition valued at $3 billion. The timing mattered. Missing the meeting would not destroy the deal, but it would complicate months of negotiation and give leverage to the other side. Malcolm arrived early, declined the premium lounge, and spent 20 minutes near the concourse observing how employees handled delays, questions, and mistakes. Most interactions were unremarkable. A gate agent helped an elderly traveler change a seat. Another employee calmly explained a baggage rule to a frustrated businessman. Malcolm took mental notes without writing anything down. He had built his career by noticing the distance between what organizations claimed and what people experienced. When boarding began, he joined the priority line and waited behind a white businessman whose digital pass would not load properly. Elaine smiled, asked for his last name, found the reservation, and waved him through with an apology. The exchange took less than a minute. Then Malcolm stepped forward. He offered a polite greeting and turned his phone toward the scanner. Elaine looked at the pass, then at him, then back at the screen. Her eyes paused on the seat assignment. 2A. The scanner flashed yellow, the same temporary error it had shown moments earlier, but the warmth in her face disappeared. She did not ask for his last name. She did not attempt the manual lookup she had just used. Instead, she studied his clothes, his bag, and the calm confidence with which he stood there. Malcolm felt the shift before she spoke. It was subtle, almost invisible, but familiar enough to tighten something in his chest. Elaine tilted her head and said, "Are you sure you're in the correct boarding line?" Malcolm held her gaze. Around them, wheels rolled across tile, announcements echoed through the terminal, and the line behind him grew. He answered evenly, "Yes, seat 2A." Elaine did not reach for the scanner again. She reached for doubt. Her question had been soft enough to sound reasonable, but Malcolm heard the assumption beneath it. He recognized the moment when curiosity became suspicion. "Yes," he said again. "I'm in the correct line." Elaine glanced at the yellow warning on the scanner as if it confirmed something she had already decided. "I'll need your identification." Malcolm handed over his driver's license. She compared the photograph to his face, then looked at the screen again. The white businessman who had stood before him was already walking down the jet bridge, never asked for anything beyond his last name. Malcolm noticed the difference but waited to see how far the process would go. Elaine typed slowly. "Who purchased this ticket?" "My company." "Which company?" "Reed Crest Holdings." The name meant nothing to her. "Do you have the card used for payment?" Malcolm's eyes narrowed. "Is that required?" "I'm asking for additional verification." "The passenger before me had the same scanner error," Malcolm said. "You verified him by name." The line behind him shifted. Elaine straightened, not because he had raised his voice, but because he had named the inconsistency. "Every situation is different, sir. The error appears identical." "I said every situation is different." Noah Kim stood at the adjacent terminal, pretending to review the passenger list while listening. He had seen the same warning twice. The first time, Elaine had blamed the airport Wi-Fi. This time, she had turned a technical glitch into an inquiry about identity, employment, and payment. Noah knew something was wrong, but he also knew what happened to employees who questioned Elaine. A junior agent had once lost his preferred shifts after correcting her in public. Everyone understood the lesson. Malcolm took back his license. "You confirmed that my name matches the reservation. What remains?" Elaine studied the monitor. "This ticket was purchased late, yesterday afternoon, for a premium cabin." "Correct." "And you're traveling alone?" Malcolm paused. The question had nothing to do with the scanner. "Why is that relevant?" "I need to understand the purpose of your travel." "A business meeting." "What kind of business?" Several passengers began listening. A woman near the front lifted her phone, ready to record. Malcolm looked at Elaine. "Is every premium passenger required to explain his profession and itinerary?" Elaine exhaled. "Most passengers cooperate without turning routine questions into a confrontation." The word landed exactly as she intended. Malcolm had not moved. His hands remained at his sides. His voice had never risen. Yet the moment he asked why he was being treated differently, she described him as the source of tension. "I am cooperating," he said. "I provided identification and answered your questions. I am asking why the rules changed when I reached the desk." Elaine's gaze hardened. "Your tone is becoming difficult. My tone is controlled. That is your interpretation." She turned to Noah. "Open a secondary review note." Noah hesitated. "The reservation is confirmed. The seat is valid." Elaine faced him slowly. "Open the note." Noah complied, his fingers unsteady. Elaine dictated while watching Malcolm. "Passenger questioning verification process. Displays increasing agitation. Something colder than anger settled over him." The label was being created first. The evidence would be shaped around it later. The woman raised her phone and began recording. Elaine noticed but continued. "Step aside, sir. We need to keep boarding moving." Malcolm moved exactly where she directed while others passed. Elaine returned after several passengers boarded. "I need the payment card." "No," Malcolm said. "You confirmed my identity and reservation. Unless you can show me a written requirement, I will not provide unrelated financial information." Elaine's face became still. Refusal noted. "I did not refuse a policy. I refused a request you have not justified." She typed again. "Passenger declining verification." Malcolm watched the words appear and understood the danger. In systems built on vague descriptions, the person writing the report could become more powerful than the person living the event. Elaine looked toward the jet bridge. "Your behavior is affecting boarding." Malcolm answered quietly, "No, your decision is affecting boarding." Offense flickered across her face. He had not submitted to the role she had assigned him. And that had become the real problem for her. The boarding area felt smaller, as if every glance narrowed the space around Malcolm. Elaine stood behind the counter with the authority of the terminal behind her. Malcolm had only his ticket, his identification, and his discipline. "I would like to speak with your supervisor," he said. Elaine folded her hands. "I am the supervising manager at this gate." "Then I would like the name of the person above you." "You can contact customer relations after the flight." "I am trying to take the flight." Her lips tightened. "That depends on whether you continue refusing instructions." Malcolm felt the trap close. If he challenged her or showed anger, She would use it as proof. "Please state the instruction I refused," he said. Elaine turned toward the passengers, making her answer public. "You refused verification, questioned staff repeatedly, and disrupted boarding. I provided identification. The reservation is confirmed. I asked why requirements applied to me were not applied to the passenger before me." A murmur moved through the line. Elaine noticed the woman recording. "Recording airline personnel may violate airport policy." The woman kept her phone raised. "I'm standing in a public terminal." Elaine did not answer. She reached for the phone and requested airport security. Noah's stomach tightened. "Elaine," he said quietly, "we can clear the warning manually. It's a sync issue." "No, return to your station." But his reservation now. He stepped back, ashamed by how quickly his courage had collapsed. Malcolm saw it and did not blame him. Fear showed in lowered shoulders and careful eyes. 2 airport security officers arrived. Their presence turned a disagreement into an incident. Elaine spoke first. "This passenger has refused verification and is escalating." Malcolm looked at the officers. "My name is Malcolm Reed. My identification and reservation have been confirmed. I have not threatened anyone, raised my voice, or refused a written policy." Sergeant Luis Grant studied him, then Elaine. "Is there a safety concern?" Elaine paused. "His behavior is unpredictable, and I am not comfortable placing him on the aircraft." The phrase was careful. She did not claim he had done something dangerous. She claimed her discomfort was enough to make him dangerous. Malcolm felt the familiar sting. Other people's fear had often been treated as more credible than his conduct. Grant surveyed the area. No frightened witnesses, no sign of aggression. "Sir, would you step away from the gate while they complete their review?" Malcolm knew remaining there would let Elaine call his presence disruptive. "I will cooperate," he said, "but I want the record to show that I object." Elaine returned to the keyboard. "Objection noted." Then she entered another line. Noah could see it. "Passenger non-compliant with staff direction. Boarding denial recommended." Malcolm had followed every direction. Elaine was not documenting events. She was building permission for the outcome she wanted. The final boarding announcement sounded. Malcolm looked through the windows at the aircraft. Seattle suddenly felt impossibly distant. "Mr. Reed," Elaine called, holding a printed form. "Based on your conduct and my responsibility for passenger safety, you have been removed from Flight 742. The line went silent. Malcolm stepped closer, only enough to hear. "On what specific conduct?" "Your refusal to cooperate." "That did not happen. It is documented." There it was, the circular power of the report. She wrote that he was uncooperative, then used the writing as proof. Noah looked down. The woman kept recording. Grant's expression shifted toward unease. Malcolm met Elaine's eyes. "You have not taken the time to learn who I am," he said quietly. "You decided what kind of man I was before you checked the facts." Elaine lifted the form. "This conversation is over." The jet bridge door closed with 6 minutes remaining. Anger pressed against Malcolm's composure until his hands trembled. He placed them in his pockets. The aircraft pushed back minutes later. Elaine returned to her screen, converting her decision into official language. Malcolm accepted the recording woman's contact information and called Sophia Bennett. When she answered, he did not say he had been insulted. He said, "I think I found the gap between the company's policies and the truth." The real journey had just begun there. The airport hotel was only a short shuttle ride from the terminal, yet Malcolm felt as if he had crossed into another world. The glass doors closed behind him, muting the concourse. He set down his bag and stood still. His anger had not disappeared. It had changed shape. At the gate it had been personal, sharp, and humiliating. Here in the silence it became analytical. Elaine Porter had not merely insulted him. She had exposed a weakness in a company his firm partly owned. Malcolm opened his laptop and joined the Seattle meeting. The executives received the same measured focus he brought to every negotiation. For nearly 2 hours he reviewed routes, labor projections, warehouse contracts, and the final conditions of a $3 billion acquisition. He did not let Elaine's decision consume months of work, yet between questions his mind returned to the phrase she had typed, increasing agitation. A description that had not matched his behavior had become an official fact. before he left the desk. By the end of the meeting, both sides agreed to postpone the final signature until morning. Malcolm closed the call and found Sophia Bennett waiting on another screen. Her expression was controlled, but her eyes were not. "Tell me exactly what happened," she said. Malcolm described the scanner error, the different treatment of the passenger ahead of him, the request for his payment card, the questions about his profession, the security officers, Noah's hesitation, and Elaine's final report. He spoke without exaggeration. Sophia interrupted only to clarify timing and language. "Did she know who you were?" "No. Does the airline know now?" "Not yet." Sophia leaned back. "What do you want done?" Malcolm looked toward the windows. Planes rose beyond the glass, their lights disappearing into clouds. "I do not want her fired tonight." Sophia studied him. "That is probably what corporate will offer once they know." "Exactly. One employee, one apology, one settlement, one press statement. Then they will call the problem solved." He opened the incident email that had already arrived from Horizon Union. It described a service disagreement and offered him a $150 travel voucher. The complaint status had been marked resolved. Malcolm turned the screen toward Sophia. "This is what happens to someone without influence: a form letter, a coupon, and a closed file. A missed premium flight, public humiliation, and a false behavioral record had been converted into an inconvenience worth $150. Sophia's voice cooled. "Then we need to know whether this is isolated or repeatable." Malcolm nodded. 4 questions. Did Elaine follow written policy? How often has she used labels like non-compliant or escalating? What happened to passengers who challenged those labels? And are managers rewarded for closing gates so quickly that fairness becomes inconvenient? Sophia began taking notes. Independent counsel? Yes. Add an airline operations specialist, a customer experience investigator, and a data analyst. How far back? 2 years, unless the pattern tells us to go further. He paused. Keep my identity out of the first review. Sophia looked up. Why? Because I want to know what the company would do if Malcolm Reed were only a man who missed a flight. Both knew the company's response might depend on the name attached. Sophia promised a preliminary file by morning. Before ending the call, she asked, "Are you all right?" Malcolm almost gave the automatic answer. Instead, he allowed himself honesty. "I am tired of having to remain perfect while someone else is allowed to be wrong about me." Sophia's expression softened. "Then we make the facts impossible to ignore." Across the airport, Elaine completed her report. She wrote that Malcolm had refused identification, challenged staff authority, and concerned nearby passengers. She omitted the verified reservation, the identical scanner error, and Noah's attempt to correct her. During his break, Noah read the report. Shame moved through him. He had known the truth and allowed Elaine's version to become official. He opened the airline's ethics portal and typed a separate account. He attached the system log showing Malcolm's ticket had been validated before the denial. Then he pressed submit. By midnight, that small act would become the first crack in a wall built from silence. By 8 the next morning, Sophia Bennett had assembled a team in hours. 4 specialists joined her in a reed crest conference room. On the main screen was Elaine Porter's personnel file. It looked ordinary: 18 years in aviation, strong punctuality scores, consistent reviews, and no major discipline. "On paper, she is exactly the kind of manager the airline rewards," Sophia said. The data analyst, Priya Shah, opened a second file. Paper is the problem. She had searched complaint records, reimbursement notes, ethics submissions, and station logs. Over 20 months, 14 complaints were connected to Elaine. 9 came from black passengers. Others involved travelers unfamiliar with airline procedures. The complaints differed, but the language used to dismiss them was the same: difficult, confrontational, non-compliant, escalating. "Those terms are subjective," the attorney said. "They can describe behavior, but they can also hide interpretation." Priya displayed 3 cases. In the first, a black school principal traveling to an education conference had been asked to prove that the premium ticket in his name had not been purchased with a stolen card. Security footage showed him speaking quietly, while Elaine's report described him as aggressive. In the second, A retired Black Army mechanic had been ordered to open his carry-on at the gate after passing security. When he asked why, Elaine wrote that he resisted a safety inspection. In the third, a black physician with top-tier loyalty status had been told the account could not belong to her because the birth date did not appear consistent. The date was correct. Her complaint was closed with a $200 credit. Malcolm listened quietly. He did not react visibly, but each case deepened the weight behind his silence. "Were any investigated?" he asked. "Not fully," Sophia said. Customer care accepted the manager's report as the primary account. Most passengers received vouchers. None were interviewed independently. The operations specialist, Martin Hale, brought up performance dashboards from Denver. Elaine's gate ranked near the top for on-time departures and boarding speed. Her supervisors had praised her ability to control passenger variables. The phrase sat on the screen like a corporate confession. "What does that mean?" Martin answered carefully. "She removes uncertainty quickly. Questions, baggage disputes, documentation problems, anything that might delay door closure, by resolving them, sometimes. Other times by removing the passenger." Priya overlaid boarding denial data with complaint records. Elaine denied boarding at nearly twice the station average. Black passengers were disproportionately represented. The sample could not prove motive alone, but the larger pattern was difficult to dismiss. The team then examined management incentives. Regional bonuses depended heavily on departure time, boarding duration, and passengers processed per minute. Complaints affected performance only after formal findings, and vouchers usually prevented that. The system rewarded speed and made scrutiny expensive. Elaine had learned that removing one difficult passenger could protect an entire team's metrics. Her managers had learned not to ask questions when the numbers looked good. She did not invent the prejudice, Sophia said, but the company gave it cover, vocabulary, and a financial reward. Malcolm walked to the screen and studied the 14 names. Yesterday, he had nearly disappeared into the same process. The difference was that his name could reach a boardroom. The others had been given credits and silence. "Contact them," he said. "Not as witnesses for my case. Ask whether they want their complaints reopened and provide independent counsel if needed." The attorney nodded. "That could create significant liability." Malcolm turned toward him. "The liability already exists. Ignoring it only keeps it hidden." Sophia placed a summary on the table. At the top were the numbers: 14 complaints, 0 complete investigations, 1 manager repeatedly rewarded. Malcolm read the line twice. Gate C24 was no longer a private injury. It exposed a system confusing efficiency with excellence and authority with truth. "Do not call Elaine a monster," he said. "That would make this too easy. Show me every decision that taught her she could do this and still be called successful." Outside, Manhattan moved through morning. Inside, one missed flight became something larger. Not a search for one villain, but an examination of the quiet approvals that had allowed one person's bias to become company practice. Daniel Whitmore was halfway through a quarterly earnings review. Sophia Bennett's call reached his private line. The name Reed Crest Holdings changed the calculation. Its 12% stake had steadied North Star Aviation Group after a difficult year and restored market confidence. Daniel expected a discussion about costs or expansion. Instead, Sophia said, "One of your gate managers denied boarding to Malcolm Reed yesterday." For several seconds, Daniel said nothing. Then his voice shifted into practiced concern. "There must have been a misunderstanding." "There was," Sophia replied. "Your company misunderstood who deserved the benefit of the doubt." Within an hour, Daniel had reviewed the security footage, the gate log, Noah Kim's ethics statement, and the automated email offering Malcolm a $150 voucher. His first instinct was containment. He offered a refund, private transportation, lifetime premium status, and a personal apology from the board. Malcolm declined everything. "I am not asking for better treatment because I can reach you," he said. "I am asking why I had to reach you before anyone cared." That afternoon, the North Star board assembled in a conference room overlooking downtown Denver. Malcolm appeared on the main screen from Manhattan, with Sophia beside him. Daniel opened with an apology, but Malcolm stopped him politely. We can discuss apologies after we discuss evidence. The footage began. A white businessman encountered the same scanner error and was waved through after a name check. Then Malcolm stepped forward. The room watched Elaine's posture change, heard her ask about payment, employment, and the purpose of his trip, and saw Malcolm remain still while the questions became more personal. They watched Noah confirm the reservation. They heard Elaine describe Malcolm as agitated. They watched security arrive because she had declared discomfort, not danger. No one spoke when the jet bridge door closed. Sophia then placed the 14 prior complaints on the screen. Board member Charles Denton cleared his throat. This may be one manager exercising poor judgment. Malcolm looked into the camera. Poor judgment once is an incident. The same judgment repeated, described in the same language, and rewarded by the same system is a pattern. Charles shifted in his chair. You are suggesting institutional discrimination. I am showing institutional permission, Malcolm said. Elaine gave trust to one passenger and suspicion to another before either man had been fully checked. Your complaint process then gave trust to her report and suspicion to every passenger who challenged it. Daniel redirected the discussion toward corrective action. Elaine has been suspended pending investigation. Necessary, Malcolm said. Not sufficient. He asked why a manager could deny boarding at twice the station average and still receive praise. He asked why words like difficult and non-compliant required no supporting behavior. He asked why speed was measured while fairness remained invisible. Every question made the room less comfortable, and the discomfort was useful. Daniel finally asked, "What exactly do you want?" Malcolm answered calmly. "Protect Noah Kim and every employee who cooperates. Reopen the prior complaints under independent review. Suspend the bonus tied to rapid door closure until you understand what it encourages. And do not publish Elaine's name as a sacrifice while pretending the company had no role." Raymond Cole, North Star's regional operations chief, leaned forward. "So you do not want us to terminate her? I want you to determine what she did, why she was allowed to do it, and who benefited from not asking questions." Daniel's polished confidence had disappeared. Malcolm was not seeking a settlement. He was forcing the board to examine the architecture of its own decisions. After a tense vote, the directors authorized an independent investigation and granted access to 2 years of operational records. Elaine remained suspended. Noah received written protection against retaliation. The 14 complaints were reopened. When the meeting ended, Daniel stayed behind on the call. "Mr. Reed, do you want her fired?" Malcolm regarded him for a long moment. "I want your company to prove it understands why this happened. If you only remove her, you will be ready to create another Elaine by next year." Elaine Porter arrived at the regional office just after 1 in the afternoon, wearing the same Navy uniform she had worn at Gate C-24. She had pressed the sleeves carefully and pinned her badge straight, as though appearance could restore control. During the drive, she had rehearsed her explanation. The passenger had been argumentative. The situation had moved quickly. She had made a judgment call under pressure. By the time she entered the conference room, she had nearly convinced herself the meeting was procedural. Raymond Cole sat at the head of the table. Beside him were an employment attorney, a human resources director, and Dr. Lena Morris, the independent investigator hired by the board. No one smiled. "Mrs. Porter," Raymond said, "this meeting concerns your handling of Flight 742 and several earlier incidents." Elaine sat down. "I submitted a complete report." Dr. Morris opened a folder. "That is one reason we are here." Elaine said Malcolm had refused verification, challenged her authority, and created concern among nearby passengers. Dr. Morris listened, then asked, "What written policy required him to produce the payment card?" Elaine hesitated. "Additional verification is permitted when circumstances appear irregular." "What circumstances?" "The ticket was purchased late. It was a premium seat. His behavior was becoming defensive." Dr. Morris placed 2 scanner reports side by side. "The passenger immediately before Mr. Reed had the same error, purchased his ticket the same day and was also in a premium cabin. You verified him by last name. Why not Mr. Reed?" Elaine looked at the pages. "Every passenger presents differently. Describe the difference without referring to your feelings. Elaine's mouth tightened. He questioned me. After you asked for information not requested from the other passenger. Raymond pressed a button. The security video appeared on the wall. Elaine watched herself greet the white businessman with a smile. Then Malcolm stepped forward and the warmth disappeared. The room heard every question. They saw Malcolm provide identification. They heard Noah confirm the reservation. They saw Malcolm keep his hands at his sides while Elaine described him as increasingly agitated. The recording ended with the jet bridge door closing. For the first time, Elaine looked uncertain. Dr. Morris compared her written report line by line with the video. Malcolm had not refused identification. No passenger had complained about him. He had complied when security asked him to move. The reservation had been validated before she removed him. Each statement she had written as fact was unsupported or contradicted by the record. I was responsible for safety, Elaine said, her voice losing its edge. Safety requires evidence, Raymond replied. Not discomfort, Doctor. Morris placed the 14 prior complaints in front of her. Elaine recognized several names: a principal, a retired mechanic, a physician. Her descriptions appeared again and again: hostile tone, challenging demeanor, non-compliant attitude. Did you notice the pattern? Dr. Morris asked. I treated difficult passengers firmly. That is not the pattern I asked about. Elaine looked down. The room remained quiet until she said, I did not know, Mr. Reed was the head of Reed Crest. Raymond's expression hardened. That is not a defense. It is the center of the problem. He leaned forward. You should not have needed to know he was a CEO. You only needed to know whether his ticket was valid and whether his conduct was unsafe. The answer to the first was yes. The answer to the second was no. Elaine tried one final argument. My gate has one of the best on-time records in Denver, Doctor. Morris nodded. And your boarding denial rate is nearly twice the station average. Some of your speed came from removing people instead of resolving problems. The conclusion was read into the record: inconsistent application of policy, inaccurate reporting, misuse of authority, and repeated reliance on biased assumptions. Raymond informed Elaine that her employment was terminated effective immediately. The company would not publish her personal information or encourage harassment, but it would acknowledge the findings and reopen the complaints. Elaine sat motionless. Her career had not ended because she failed to recognize a powerful man. It had ended because the camera showed how she treated someone she believed had no power. As she gathered her belongings, her eyes returned to the frozen image of Malcolm standing calmly at the gate. For the first time, she did not see a difficult passenger. She saw a person whose dignity she had converted into a delay she wanted removed. 2 days after Elaine Porter's termination, a sealed document arrived at Malcolm Reed's office. It was not a dismissal order. North Star had already made that decision through its own investigation. The document was more consequential: a shareholder remediation agreement acknowledging the findings, accepting management responsibility, and committing the company to a year of measurable reform. Daniel Whitmore had signed first. Raymond Cole had signed beneath him. The final line belonged to Malcolm. Sophia placed the agreement on his desk. Legal says it is stronger than the first draft. Malcolm turned the pages without reaching for his pen. The agreement confirmed that Elaine had violated policy and that previous complaints had been mishandled. It required new training and quarterly reports. Yet the language still treated the incident like a storm that had appeared without warning. They describe the damage, Malcolm said. They do not describe the machinery that produced it. A company could remove one manager, hold a workshop, publish a statement, and quietly return to the same incentives. Malcolm marked 4 sections. First, complaints involving unequal treatment would be reviewed by an independent unit rather than the manager's chain of command. Second, employees reporting misconduct would receive written protection and confidential counsel. Third, on-time bonuses would be balanced against customer fairness and the rate of overturned boarding denials. Fourth, vague labels such as aggressive, difficult, or non-compliant would require specific observable behavior. If someone writes that a passenger was threatening, Malcolm said, the report should explain what the passenger did, not how the employee felt. Sophia sent the revisions back to North Star. Daniel called within the hour. "These terms will be expensive." "So was the system you had," Malcolm replied. "You simply charged the cost to people who could not make you account for it." Daniel argued that independent review could slow operations. Malcolm reminded him that speed without accuracy was efficient failure. After a long silence, Daniel agreed. The final version returned that evening. Malcolm remained alone after Sophia left. Outside his windows, Manhattan had begun to glow. He uncapped a black fountain pen, then stopped. Elaine's face came to mind. She had spent 18 years building a career. She likely had obligations and plans that depended on that paycheck. Malcolm did not enjoy knowing that a decision connected to him had changed the direction of her life. Justice did not feel clean. It felt heavy. He thought of the 14 complainants reduced to case numbers, the principal arriving late to his conference, the retired mechanic opening his bag under public suspicion, the physician being asked to prove an identity she had already established through years of travel. None could summon a board meeting. Their stories had ended with credits and closed files. Malcolm understood that compassion for Elaine could not mean protecting her from consequences. It meant refusing to turn her humiliation into entertainment. Accountability did not require cruelty. It required truth, repair, and barriers against repetition. He signed his name. The pen moved smoothly across the page, but the moment carried no triumph. His signature did not fire her. It closed the company's defense that her conduct had been isolated and bound North Star to change. Sophia returned for the agreement. "It is done," she said. Malcolm closed the folder. "Her case is done. The work begins now." He requested the first implementation plan within 30 days and an independent audit within 90. He also asked that the 14 former complainants receive direct apologies based on evidence, not generic letters written for legal protection. Before Sophia left, Malcolm added one final instruction. "Do not name the program after me." Why not? Because fairness should not depend on remembering the investor who was mistreated. The agreement reached Denver before midnight. By morning, the board had approved every condition. One signature had helped end a manager's authority, but its larger purpose was to end the habits that had made her authority dangerous. Elaine's first weeks after North Star were defined by anger. She told herself the company had sacrificed her to satisfy a wealthy investor. She repeated that she had been under pressure and that Malcolm Reed's influence had made a routine dispute appear unforgivable. An employment attorney reviewed the video, her report, and the investigation findings. He told her carefully that the termination was supported by evidence. "The problem is not that the company disagreed with your judgment," he said. "The problem is that your written account did not match what happened." Elaine left with the same resentment, but certainty was becoming harder to maintain. North Star provided temporary transition support on the condition that she complete an external professional accountability program. Elaine nearly refused. Pride made the requirement feel insulting, but practical need overcame it. The program did not begin with lectures about prejudice. It began with language. Participants watched workplace incidents and described only observable actions. Elaine viewed a recording of a frustrated traveler speaking quickly at a counter. Her first description was aggressive. The facilitator asked, "What did he do?" Elaine answered that he appeared angry. "That is an interpretation." "What did he do?" She tried again. He raised his voice slightly, repeated a question, and looked at the clock. He did not threaten anyone, touch anyone, or block the counter. The exercise unsettled her. For years, words such as attitude and non-compliant had felt precise. Now she saw how easily they allowed feeling to disguise itself as fact. She was required to rewrite her report about Malcolm. The first version was defensive. The second was shorter. By the third, she could no longer avoid the sequence. His ticket produced a common error. She requested additional proof. He asked why. She interpreted the question as resistance. She escalated the encounter. She documented her interpretation as behavior. The report looked different when stripped of authority. It looked like a series of choices. Elaine found temporary work at a transit assistance center serving Denver commuters. The position paid less and carried no supervisory title. Her task was to help passengers understand routes, ticket machines, and service changes. At first, she disliked the lack of control. People approached confused, impatient, and embarrassed. She could no longer remove them from the line. She had to explain, listen, and try again. One rainy afternoon, a black man in his late 60s arrived breathing quickly. He had missed a connection and needed to reach a hospital before his wife underwent surgery. His questions came rapidly, and his voice grew louder when the map confused him. Elaine felt the old instinct rise. Create distance, call security, label the behavior before it became her responsibility. Then she noticed his trembling hands. His anger was fear wearing a harder face. Elaine lowered her voice, found an alternate route, contacted a dispatcher, and arranged for the next bus to wait. The man closed his eyes in relief. "Thank you for not giving up on me," he said. The words remained with her. Months later, Elaine attended a public service workshop where Noah Kim spoke about ethical reporting. North Star had promoted him to Service Integrity Coordinator after his statement proved central to the investigation. When they met in the hallway, Elaine expected judgment. Noah offered none. "I am sorry I did not speak sooner at the gate," he said. "You were afraid of me," she replied. "Yes," he did not soften the answer. Elaine looked away. "I gave you reasons to be." Noah explained that the reforms were not meant to punish one former manager forever. They were meant to prevent employees from confusing authority with accuracy. Elaine later wrote Malcolm a letter. She did not ask for reinstatement or forgiveness. She admitted that she had noticed his race, clothing, and confidence before considering the facts. She admitted that she trusted her discomfort more than his conduct. Most difficult of all, she acknowledged that intention did not erase impact. Justice had taken her position, but responsibility demanded something more, that the lesson changed the next person she encountered. For the first time, Elaine understood that accountability was not the end of dignity. It was the place where dignity had to begin again. 8 months after the incident at Gate C-24, Malcolm Reed returned to Denver International Airport for Flight 742. He wore a dark sweater, simple trousers, and the same quiet expression that had once been treated as suspicious. North Star knew he traveled occasionally, but no executive had been told the date. Malcolm wanted to see what remained after the meetings ended. The consultants left, and the urgency of scandal faded. The concourse looked familiar, but its rhythm had changed. Gate agents were no slower, yet they seemed less hurried by the need to prove control. A notice near the desk explained that passengers could request an independent review of disputed boarding decisions. Another told employees how to report concerns without going through a direct supervisor. The signs were modest. Malcolm knew culture was not transformed by signs. Then a real test appeared. A young black musician arrived with a cello and a confirmed seat purchased for the instrument. The scanner showed an error assigning both traveler and cello to the same boarding position. Several people sighed. Months earlier, a manager focused only on speed might have blamed the musician and forced the instrument into checked baggage. The new supervisor, Maya Brooks, examined the receipt, checked the cabin layout, and called the flight crew. "Your purchase is valid," she said. "The system duplicated the boarding sequence. Give me 2 minutes to correct it." Her tone did not imply that the musician caused the error. When another passenger complained, Maya answered calmly, "We are resolving a valid reservation. Boarding will continue shortly." The problem was fixed in less than 3 minutes. The cello entered the aircraft safely. Malcolm had not been recognized, and that made the moment meaningful. Noah Kim approached carrying a tablet. His new title, Service Integrity Coordinator, appeared beneath his name. He saw Malcolm and smiled. "Seat 2A is ready." There was no performance, excessive welcome, or attempt to move Malcolm ahead of others. Noah treated him with professional respect, then helped the next passenger. Malcolm appreciated the absence of special treatment. Equality was not a red carpet. It was a consistent floor beneath everyone's feet. Once aboard, he opened a letter Sophia had forwarded that morning. It was from Elaine Porter. She did not excuse herself or ask him to restore what she had lost. She described rewriting her report and realizing how often she had presented assumptions as facts. She wrote about the transit passenger trying to reach the hospital and admitted that months earlier she might have seen only a loud, difficult man. Now she had seen fear and urgency. Malcolm read the letter twice. One letter did not erase 14 complaints or repair the humiliation at gate C-24. Change was not a declaration. It was a pattern built in the opposite direction. Still, the letter suggested that consequences had created reflection rather than only bitterness. He wrote a brief response. "I hope what you have learned continues to shape how you treat the next person who needs patience." He did not offer immediate forgiveness. He offered a standard. A veteran flight attendant stopped beside his seat. "Mr. Reed, the new reporting system has changed more than passenger service," she said. "Employees can question a decision now without risking their schedules." The atmosphere feels lighter. Malcolm looked toward the gate, where Maya was helping another traveler. That is what the reforms were supposed to do. As the aircraft pushed back, Malcolm thought about how discrimination often survived without explicit insults. It lived in the extra question asked of one person, the doubt applied before evidence, the vague label entered into a permanent record, and the institution that trusted authority because authority was convenient. His power had allowed him to challenge the system, but its value would be measured by what happened to people whose names would never reach a boardroom. Flight 742 climbed over the Rocky Mountains into clear morning light. Gate C-24 continued operating behind them, not because employees feared Malcolm's return, but because the company had begun to understand a simpler truth. Human dignity did not require a premium ticket, a corporate title, or proof of importance. It required only that one person look at another and see a human being before seeing a category. What part of Malcolm's decision mattered most to you? Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories about dignity, accountability, and change.